June 18th, 2012, 4:12 inches the morning. A ship-wide alarm blares across the oasis of the seas, somewhere in the Mediterranean. A girl is missing, 8 years old, last seen in the main dining hall. By sunrise, they find her favorite stuffed penguin by the railing on deck 10. By noon, the search is called off. Her mother, Mira Farouk, flies home to Dubai 3 days later. Alone, she buries an empty coffin. She screams at a grave with no body. She spends 13 years learning how to breathe through the kind of pain that has no name. And then, on a Saturday afternoon in the Caribbean, she sees a woman who looks just like her dead daughter. The woman is with 2 small children. She was imagining if her Lyanna was alive, she might be a mother now. Before she could turn her eyes away, she saw a man approach the woman and give her a kiss on the head. That must be her husband. But the moment she had a clear view of the man's face, the strong jaw, the confident smile she once loved her world came crashing. Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily update on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before the alarm, before the empty coffin, before the 13 years of nameless pain, there was a penthouse on Sheikh Zayed Road, with floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a kingdom of light. Mira Farouk built that view herself. Not just the apartment, she'd designed 3 of the towers she could see from her living room. At 34, she had the career, the husband, the daughter. The architecture magazines called her a visionary. Her colleagues called her demanding. She called herself blessed. Samir was the kind of husband who looked perfect in photographs. Strong jaw, confident smile, the way he'd rest his hand on the small of her back at gallery openings and charity galas. He managed luxury real estate developments, the kind of deals that required hushed phone calls and offshore meetings. Mira didn't ask questions. She was too busy with her own empire, too proud of the life they'd constructed together. When he started coming home later, when the calls became more frequent and his jaw more tight, she told herself it was just business pressure. Successful men carried stress. It was the price of ambition. But Lyanna knew something was wrong. At 8 years old, children sense shifts in air pressure before the storm arrives. She stopped asking her father to read bedtime stories. She stopped showing him her drawings. She'd watch him from doorways with eyes that seemed older than they should be, and when Mira asked if everything was okay, Lyanna would just nod and retreat to her room. The distance grew like frost on glass, slow, quiet, invisible, until you tried to see through it. In May 2012, Samir suggested the cruise, a Mediterranean voyage on the oasis of the seas. "We need this," he said, and his voice had an edge Mira chose not to hear. Family time, just the 3 of us. Mira saw it as the solution. 2 weeks away from Dubai, from work, from whatever pressure was grinding Samir down. She convinced herself that sun and sea would melt whatever had frozen between them. She didn't see the way Samir's hand trembled when he booked the tickets. She didn't notice that he paid in cash. The oasis of the seas was a floating city. 22 stories high, 6,000 passengers, 16 decks of restaurants and pools and theaters that promised escape. Mira stood on the balcony of their suite as the ship left port, watching Barcelona shrink into the distance, and felt something like hope. This would fix them. This had to fix them. It didn't. Lyanna spent the first 3 days in the kids' club, choosing strangers over her parents. When Mira tried to take her to the water slides, Lyanna said she was tired. When Mira suggested they get gelato together, Lyanna said she wasn't hungry. The distance that had started in Dubai grew wider on the open water, and Mira felt herself drowning in it. She told herself it was a phase. 8-year-olds have moods. She'd grow out of it. Samir was worse. He'd disappear for hours, claiming he needed to check emails, handle one last deal. She'd find him on deck 7 at midnight, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in Arabic too fast and too quiet for her to understand. When she asked what was wrong, he'd kiss her forehead and say, "Nothing that won't be solved soon." His smile never reached his eyes. June 17th, 2012. Their last dinner together, the main dining hall, white tablecloths and chandeliers, a photographer circulating between tables. Mira wore the dress Samir loved. She ordered Lyanna's favorite pasta. She tried to make conversation about the show they'd seen that afternoon, about the dolphins they might see tomorrow in Santorini. Lyanna pushed food around her plate and said nothing. Samir pulled out his phone and aimed it at them. "Smile," he said. "Let's remember this." Mira smiled. Lyanna didn't, and in the split second before the flash, Mira saw a flicker of something in her daughter's eyes that looked like fear. But the moment passed, the photo was taken, and Samir put his phone away. "Perfect," he said. 8 hours later, Lyanna would be gone. 3:45 a.m. Mira woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that screams. She didn't know why she'd opened her eyes, why her heart was already racing before her mind caught up. She turned toward Lyanna's bed. Empty. Covers thrown back. Stuffed penguin gone. She told herself it was nothing. Bathroom. Maybe Lyanna couldn't sleep and went to get water. She checked the bathroom. Empty. She checked the balcony. Empty. The suite was 600 square feet, and her daughter wasn't in any of them. She opened the cabin door to find Samir in the hallway, fully dressed, shoes on, phone in his hand. "Where's Lyanna?" Her voice came out wrong, too high, too sharp. "What do you mean? I thought she was sleeping." But his eyes didn't search the hallway. They didn't move toward the cabin. They stayed fixed on Mira's face, watching her reaction. "Why are you dressed? It's almost 4 in the morning. Emergency call. Business. A deal in Singapore fell through. I didn't want to wake you." The words came too smooth, too rehearsed. "Have you checked everywhere?" She had. They both knew she had. That's when Mira started screaming. The ship-wide alarm went off at 4:12 a.m. Security swept every deck, checked every pool, every theater, every restaurant. Passengers were told to stay in their cabins. 6,000 people looking for one 8-year-old girl in the middle of the Mediterranean. By sunrise, a crew member found Lyanna's stuffed penguin on deck 10, tucked against the base of a railing. No other evidence, no witnesses, no body. Samir gave his statement to authorities with tears streaming down his face. He described Lyanna's purple pajamas, her favorite penguin, the way she couldn't sleep without it. He told them about the family dinner, about trying to bond, about being a better father. His voice broke in all the right places. The security footage showed nothing, a blind spot in camera coverage, right where the penguin was found. By noon, the captain made the call. Search suspended. The ship had to dock in Santorini, scheduled to maintain. "An accident," they said. "A tragedy. These things happen." Mira didn't speak for 3 days. They flew home to Dubai on June 21st. Samir sat in first class, 3 rows behind Mira, because she couldn't stand to look at him, not because she blamed him, because looking at him meant remembering. Remembering Lyanna's face at dinner, remembering the empty bed, remembering the penguin by the railing with no daughter attached to it. The memorial service was held at the Jumeirah Mosque on June 28th. 200 people came, colleagues, clients, family friends, who didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. The coffin was white and small and empty. Mira knew it was empty. Everyone knew it was empty. But they lowered it into the ground anyway because grief requires rituals even when nothing makes sense. When the first shovel of dirt hit the coffin, Mira screamed. Not crying, screaming. The kind of sound that comes from a place deeper than lungs, older than language. She screamed until her sister had to pull her away from the grave, until her voice gave out, until she collapsed on the manicured grass of the cemetery and couldn't remember how to stand. Samir stood 10 feet away, dry-eyed, accepting condolences. That night, he slept in the guest room. He said he didn't want to disturb her. He said she needed space to grieve. What he meant was he couldn't look at her either. The weeks bled into each other. Mira stopped going to work, stopped showering, stopped answering the phone. She'd wake up at 3:45 a.m. every morning, the exact time she'd found the empty bed, and she'd lie there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a pain that never came because it never left. Samir moved through the penthouse like a ghost. He went to work. He came home. He ate dinner in his office with the door closed. When Mira tried to talk to him about Lyanna, about the investigation that had gone nowhere, about the unanswered questions that were eating her alive, he'd say, "I can't. I just can't." And he'd walk away. 3 months after the funeral, he stopped wearing his wedding ring. 6 months after the funeral, Mira woke up to find a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't live in this pain anymore. I need to start over. The lawyers will contact you about the divorce. I'm signing everything over the penthouse. The accounts, all of it. I just need to be free of this. Don't try to find me. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later. He'd already signed them, already transferred the assets, already closed his business accounts. His lawyer said Samir had been extremely cooperative and just wanted a clean break. No alimony demands, no custody disputes because there was no child left to fight over. Just a signature line and a life erased. Mira hired investigators. They found nothing. Samir Farouk had vanished as completely as his daughter, leaving behind only a penthouse full of ghosts and a woman who'd lost everything twice. The first year, Mira tried to keep working. She'd show up to client meetings with dark circles under her eyes and forget what building she was supposed to be designing. She'd stand in front of blueprints and see only the layout of the oasis of the sea's deck 10, the railing, the blind spot in the cameras. Her assistant found her crying in the supply closet on a Tuesday afternoon. Her partners suggested she take a leave of absence. She sold them her share of the firm for a fraction of what it was worth and didn't negotiate. The second year, she hired the investigators. 3 different firms, each one promising answers. They dug into Samir's business dealings and found a catastrophe. Offshore accounts drained, loans from dangerous people, a real estate empire on the verge of collapse. The Mediterranean cruise had been booked 2 weeks after a creditor threatened legal action. The timing lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. But proving conspiracy and proving murder are different things. The ship's investigation was closed. The Greek authorities had no body, no evidence, no reason to reopen it. Lyanna's case went cold. Samir's disappearance was legal. A man abandoning his life wasn't a crime. The third year, Mira stopped sleeping in bedrooms. She'd wake up at 3:45 a.m., screaming, seeing Lyanna's empty bed, feeling the Mediterranean sun on her face while her world ended. She slept on the couch with the lights on. Then she stopped sleeping at all. The fourth year, she tried to die. Pills and vodka in a bathtub in the penthouse that used to be a kingdom. Her sister found her in time. The hospital kept her for 6 weeks. The therapist said she had complex PTSD, severe depression, unresolved grief. Mira said she had nothing left. The fifth year, she left Dubai. The city was a grave she couldn't escape. She sold the penthouse, sold the furniture, sold everything that held memory. She moved to London where rain replaced sun, and no one knew her name or her story. She started therapy 3 times a week. She took pills that made the world soft at the edges. She learned to breathe again, slowly, like a child learning to walk. Years 6 through 12 were a fog. Therapy sessions, support groups, women who'd lost children to car accidents, to cancer, to drownings, to unexplained disappearances. None of them had lost a child and a husband in the same breath. None of them had the questions Mira carried like stones in her chest, but they taught her survival. They taught her that you don't heal from this kind of loss, you just learn to carry it differently. By year 13, something shifted. Not healing, not closure, but acceptance of the absence of answers. Mira turned 47 in March 2025. Her therapist suggested a trip. Somewhere warm, she said. Somewhere you can just exist without the weight. Mira booked a week in the Caribbean. Her sister came with her. It was supposed to be about breathing, about peace, about learning to live in a world where her daughter was gone and her husband was a ghost and the answers would never come. It was supposed to be the beginning of letting go. But before we follow Mira to the Caribbean, before we watch her world shatter for the second time, you need to know what she didn't, what the investigators missed, what the ship's security never found, the truth that was hidden in plain sight for 13 years. May 3rd, 2012, 15 days before the cruise. Samir made 4 phone calls from his office in Dubai, each one lasting less than 2 minutes. The calls were routed through a VPN to a burner phone in Athens. The man on the other end was Khalid Mansour, a former business partner who disappeared from Dubai's real estate scene 3 years earlier after a deal went bad. Khalid now worked in ship operations, procurement, logistics, the kind of position that had access to crew schedules and security protocols. May 10th, 2012, 8 days before the cruise. Samir wired $75,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The transfer was coded as consulting fees. 3 hours later, $50,000 moved from that account to another in Barbados under a shell corporation. The money bought silence and logistics. A tender boat, falsified maintenance logs, a blind spot in the camera system that already existed but needed to stay blind. May 15th, 2012, 3 days before departure. Samir sat Lyanna down in her bedroom while Mira worked late. He told her a story about how sometimes families need to start over, how Mommy was stressed and angry all the time because of work, how Daddy had made mistakes but wanted to fix them, how they could have an adventure together, just the two of them, somewhere beautiful where nobody would find them. He told her it would be like a game, a secret. He told her Mommy would understand eventually, that she'd be happier without them. Lyanna was 8 years old. She believed her father. June 17th, 2012, 11:47 p.m. Lyanna pretended to be asleep until she heard Mira's breathing go deep and steady. Then she got out of bed, still in her purple pajamas, clutching her stuffed penguin. She left the cabin and found Khalid waiting by the service elevator on deck 7. He was wearing crew uniform, carrying a maintenance kit, looking like he belonged. "Ready for the adventure?" he whispered. Lyanna nodded. They took the service elevator down to deck 3, where the tender boats were stored for emergency evacuations and shore excursions. Khalid had already disabled the alarm on Bay 7. The tender was a small motorboat, 12 feet long, enough for 3 people. Samir was already inside, wearing civilian clothes, a duffel bag at his feet. "Hi, baby girl," he said, reaching for her. Lyanna climbed in. Khalid placed her penguin carefully on the railing of deck 10, exactly where the cameras couldn't see, exactly where it would be found at sunrise. Then he returned to the tender, started the motor, and they slipped into the dark Mediterranean like ghosts. By 4:12 a.m., when the alarm went off, they were 20 nautical miles away, approaching a private dock on a tiny Greek island that didn't ask questions. By noon, when the search was called off, they were already gone. Samir had planned it perfectly, and Mira never knew. May 17th, 2025, 13 years, 10 months, and 29 days after Lyanna vanished. Mira stood on a beach in Barbados with her toes in white sand and her sister beside her, and for the first time in over a decade, she felt something close to peace. The sun was warm without being cruel. The water was turquoise and infinite. Her therapist had been right. Sometimes you need distance from your ghosts to remember you're still alive. "You look relaxed," her sister said. Mira almost smiled. "I think I am." The beach was crowded with weekend tourists and locals, families building sandcastles, couples in the water, a volleyball game near the pier. Normal life, the kind Mira had forgotten existed. She was watching a child bury his father in sand when she saw the woman. 20 feet away, early 20s, long dark hair, bronze skin, holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 4 years old, while a toddler girl clung to her hip. The woman was laughing at something the boy said, her head thrown back, her smile wide and unguarded. Mira's breath stopped. The face, the exact shape of the eyes, the curve of the jaw, the way she moved, graceful, confident, familiar in a way that reached into Mira's chest and squeezed. It was impossible. Lyanna would be 21 now. This woman was 21, but Lyanna was dead. Lyanna had been dead for 13 years. Mira told herself she was seeing things, grief hallucinations. Her therapist had warned her about this, the mind playing tricks, superimposing the lost onto the living. But the woman didn't vanish. She stayed solid, real, laughing with the children as they ran toward the water. Then a man approached them from the beach bar, tall, graying at the temples, carrying 2 drinks. He handed one to the woman and kissed the top of her head with easy affection. The kind of gesture that speaks of years, of routine, of family. Mira's sister was saying something. Mira couldn't hear her. All sound had been replaced by a ringing in her ears, a pressure behind her eyes. She took a step forward, then another. She needed to see his face, needed to confirm she was losing her mind, because the alternative was... The man turned, strong jaw, confident smile. Older now, weathered by sun and time, but unmistakable. Samir. Mira's legs gave out. She didn't fall. Her sister caught her, but the world tilted sideways, reality fracturing like glass. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. Samir was gone. Lyanna was dead. She'd buried an empty coffin. She'd spent 13 years drowning. She'd tried to die. She'd learned to breathe again. This was a breakdown. This was psychosis. This was... The young woman's eyes found Mira's across the beach, and Mira watched recognition flash across her daughter's face. Not confusion, not curiosity. Recognition, then fear. The woman grabbed both children, whispered something sharp to Samir, and hurried toward the parking lot. Samir's head snapped toward Mira, their eyes locked for 3 seconds that contained 13 years of betrayal. Then he followed his family, moving fast but not running, controlled panic. Mira screamed. Not words, just sound. Pure, animal sound. Her sister was calling for help. Tourists were staring. Someone asked if she needed a doctor, but Mira was already breaking. Because she wasn't insane. She was right, and that was so much worse. Mira's sister wanted to take her to the hospital, wanted to call the therapist in London, wanted to get her on the next flight home before whatever fragile recovery she'd built collapsed completely, but Mira refused. Because she'd seen Lyanna's face. She'd seen the recognition, the fear, the guilt. You don't hallucinate guilt. I need your phone, Mira said. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steel. She'd taken a photo. Just one, in those seconds before her world exploded. Blurry, zoomed in too far, but clear enough. The woman, the children. Samir's profile as he turned away. She stared at it until the pixels burned into her retinas. Her sister watched her with the careful eyes of someone afraid to trigger a psychotic break. Mira, maybe we should... I'm not crazy. Mira's voice cracked. I need you to believe me. I'm not crazy. The investigation took 3 days. Mira showed the photo to everyone, bartenders, shop owners, beach vendors, anyone who might recognize a face. Most shook their heads. Some looked uncomfortable and said nothing. One woman, a server at a beachside cafe, studied the photo for a long time. The Riveras, she said finally. That's what they call themselves. Been here maybe 5-6 years? Keep to themselves mostly. Nice family. The father tips well. Riveras, not Farouk's. Mira's hands trembled as she wrote it down. She found a private investigator in Bridgetown, a man who asked no questions when she paid him in cash. She gave him the photo and the name, and 48 hours. He came back with an address, a background that was all fabrication, and one critical detail. The man called himself Carlos Rivera, but his accent sometimes slipped into Gulf Arabic when he was angry. Mira pulled up the old investigation files. She'd kept on her laptop the ones from 2013, when she'd hired those investigators to find Samir. She found Khalid Mansour's profile, former business partner, disappeared from Dubai in 2009, last known location, Athens, last known employment, cruise ship logistics. She searched variations of his name, Khalid, Mansour, K. Mansour. She found a property record in Barbados dated 2017, purchased under the name K. Rivera, the same fake name Samir was using. The pieces locked together like a blueprint. Samir hadn't just faked Lyanna's death, he'd planned it with Khalid years in advance. The cruise ship job, the Mediterranean route, the tender boat escape. And afterward, Khalid had helped them disappear here, in the Caribbean, with new names and a new life built on the ashes of hers. Samir had used their daughter as a pawn. He'd groomed her, manipulated her, stolen her childhood and Mira's entire existence to escape his debts and his marriage. He'd let Mira bury an empty coffin, let her try to die, let her spend 13 years in a hell he'd engineered, and he'd given Lyanna 2 more children, built a whole new family while Mira's life turned to wreckage. The investigator gave her the address on May 20th. A house on the northwestern coast, remote, accessible by a single dirt road. Beachfront property with no neighbors for a mile in either direction. Private, hidden, safe. Mira looked at the address and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not rage. Rage was too hot, too human. This was something older, something absolute. She bought a gun from a man in a Bridgetown parking lot who didn't ask for ID. A revolver, simple and reliable. He showed her how to load it, how to aim, how to shoot. She practiced once in the woods behind her hotel, the sound of the gunshot echoing across empty hills. That night, she sat on her hotel bed, with the gun in her lap and the address on the nightstand. Her sister was asleep in the next room, medicated and exhausted from worry. Mira thought about calling the police, about doing this the right way, about justice through the system. But the system had failed her 13 years ago when they called off the search at noon, when they ruled it an accident without a body. When Samir walked away with divorce papers and a clean slate, the system had failed Lyanna when it let her father steal her life. Mira loaded the gun. Tomorrow, she would get her answers. Tomorrow, she would face the man who destroyed everything. And tomorrow, one way or another, the lie would end. May 21st, 2025. 17 inches the afternoon. Mira stood at the door of the beachside house with the gun in her purse and 13 years of grief burning in her chest. She didn't knock. She walked in. Lyanna was in the kitchen with the 2 children. The boy was coloring at the table. The toddler was on her hip. She looked up when the door opened and the color drained from her face. "Mom." The word came out broken, barely a whisper. Mira's legs almost gave out hearing it. Mom. After 13 years, after an empty coffin and a suicide attempt and a decade of learning to breathe through pain that had no name. Mom. "Where is he?" Mira's voice was steady, cold. "Mom, Lyanna's eyes filled with tears. She set the toddler down carefully, gently, then stood between Mira and the children, protective. "I missed you. Every day. I missed you. But Dad said you'd be better off without us, that you were stressed and angry and we were holding you back. He said we'd come back when things were better, but then he lied." Mira pulled out the gun. Lyanna gasped. The boy looked up from his coloring book, too young to understand but old enough to sense danger. "Mom, please. I didn't know. I was 8. I believed him. You were 21 on the beach 3 days ago. You saw me and you ran. Because I was scared. Because I didn't know what to tell you, how to explain." Lyanna was sobbing now, hands shaking. "I thought you'd hate me. I thought." The door opened behind Mira. Samir stood in the doorway with a bag of groceries. He saw Mira, saw the gun. The groceries hit the floor. "Mira." His voice was different now, harder, the mask gone. "Put it down. You let me bury an empty coffin. You were suffocating us. The business was failing. I had no choice. You had a daughter who loved you." Mira's hands were steady on the gun. "You used her. You destroyed me. For what? To play house on a beach?" Samir moved, fast, charging her to disarm her, to silence her the way he'd silenced everything else. But Mira had spent 13 years living with ghosts. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. She fired. The sound was deafening in the small house. Samir collapsed, blood spreading across his chest. The children were screaming. Lyanna was screaming. Mira turned the gun toward her daughter. "Mom, no." But Mira saw the toddler hiding behind Lyanna's legs, saw the boy crying under the table, saw children who had nothing to do with the sins of their father. She saw Lyanna at 8 years old, manipulated and groomed and stolen. She lowered the gun. "Let it fall to the floor." "The Lyanna I knew died on that cruise ship 13 years ago," Mira said quietly. "You're just a ghost in his lie." Then she walked outside and waited for the police. They arrested her on the beach, charged her with murder. But her confession, her evidence, her testimony forced the authorities to reopen the 2012 case. They found the money trail, found Khalid Mansour, found the tender boat logs and the falsified maintenance records and the shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. The truth came out. All of it. Samir's conspiracy, Lyanna's fake death, 13 years of calculated betrayal. Mira Farouk was sentenced to 15 years. But in her cell, alone, she finally had what she'd been searching for since June 18th, 2012. The truth. And something that looked like justice. Even if it cost her everything.